Hey, what is up, Libertarian family? It is I, K-Rod here, back at it with another video. Alright, let's get right to it. Always wanted to kind of, get this video done. But, yeah, let's get this done. Because I was going to talk about education being held under a free market. But I'll probably say that for later on tonight. Alright, let's talk about it. This video is long overdue. But, I'll be talking about why colonialism does not equal to free markets and the historic stigmatism that people play through mental gymnastics to defend colonialism, to say free markets are only successful because of colonial society being built. So yeah, let's get right to it. I would probably start off with our definitions. What is a free market versus what is colonialism? Colonialism is the idea that a government has the divine right, or I wouldn't even say right, but they have the political intention to invade another part of the world for the sake of utilizing political imperialist actions to force their ideas onto another part of the world. But that never becomes successful because colonial armies are usually failures as they go in and try to force people to live the way they live. So it's a measure of trying to take away, like obviously, in a war sense, politically, most governments go after other governments for the tax system. But if you're invading a people that don't, that doesn't really focus on, invading other people, and they focus on defending their territory and being left alone, then like no those those battles are harder to fight because you're going up against people that have a much higher defensive strategy to know their land and actually defend it. But the thing is that colonialism as a whole is a philosophy based on the premise of unjustifiably invading other parts of the world against people's consent, and you're utilizing certain evil tactics to force your ideals onto people that have never agreed to your country's ideals. So, here's the thing. For free markets is just simply the trading of private property, and people consensually come together in a decentralized manner to coexist on voluntary means. That's simply what a free market is. Some idiots would like to say free markets are just evil, corrupt businesses where people create firms for the sake of making money and all this other nonsensical garbage. But in actual basic economics terms, free markets are just markets that have people that come out of their way to conduct voluntary exchanges through consensual means with other people that want to grow their business and to grow individuals better with goods and services by by way of peer-to-peer exchanges. So those are my two definitions that I would have of what defines a free market and what defines colonialism. So here's the thing about colonialism. Colonialism is a very, very mentally retarded philosophy. There is no justification to invade another person's land for the sake of what I would even say is to be unjustified. But then there are governments in human history that have started out invading other groups of people, and therefore they ended up, winning and failing at the same time because it is a failure of lack of structure, and it is a control mechanism of pushing a certain narrative to say that, well, our government is more justified than your government, so therefore we need to be the ones to tell you what to do because we have a divine right to do so. And that's really how most governments operate off of. They operate off of fear, but they most likely operate off of mental retardation to force people to think that what you're doing is a good thing, but it's not a good thing. It's a very evil process, and it's a very destructive mechanism that people do. So here's the thing. Um, when we just take a look at any political example of colonialism in effect, colonialism as a whole is a very destructive imperialist mindset. I can even go back to even saying like, take a look at the Sumerian Empire. We could take a look at ancient Africa. Like on multiple nations that were going to war with each other. I mean, European nations definitely they were always colonizing one another because, like for example, like I'll even use Belgium. That's a great example. Belgium was pretty much like a product of Dutch and French people, and if I'm not mistaken, the French had controlled Belgium for a good amount of time. And when Belgium had reclaimed its independence, the French were still, creating certain policies against Belgian government authorities where they were trying to dictate their rules and, yeah, their rules of structure and their way of life to basically divide themselves against Belgian, lifestyle and culture. But I mean, that's just like a pure example of like colonialism does not equal a good society. We can even go with any recent, colonial actions, like such as, I'll use Israel as a great example because Israel, people try to hype that up to say, Israel is a peaceful country. They never done no wrong. They've always been, been on been on the defensive end, out of every single war that they've been in. And the truth is that Israel is not really a good nation at all. Israel's design or political design of what it was meant to be was mainly due to support Jewish Zionism. And when you've seen the evolution of Israel being created, Israel was basically designing itself to be a kind of like a fascist like state, kind of similar to Nazi Germany. But the difference is that Israel is sustaining its cultural value for people that are Jewish, but they only hold it to white European Jews. And that's really how that's how Israel is built to be because Israel does not have this like whole diversity structure where people can just freely walk in and actually coexist. So, the issue is that when you take a look at, the structure within Israel, they do a lot of authoritarian ideals and they mentally, you know, like basically break they mentally brainwash their population to make them think that they're superior to everybody else. But in all honest reality, Israel is very vulnerable and the state alone has wasted so much resources to go to war with other countries. And you see that Israel is a very vulnerable state because, a lot of countries can just go right in and just defeat Israel if it wanted to. But it's more to do with Israel being funded by the United States government. And therefore, this is like colonial thinking to say, well, the only reason why Israel is doing good is because markets have helped Israel grow and Israel has done a great job economically, blah, blah, blah. And that's how people live great in society. No, that's not true. And I mean, I could say that the same thing for Palestine, for, Iraq, Iran, and all these other countries. But it's like you easily see that colonial philosophy does not equate to any means of a free market. But I'll even go further. I'll even use, the European colonial armies like the UK, France, Italy, Spain, Germany, all these bitch ass Dutch countries, like the Netherlands and the bitch ass Belgians. Yeah, fuck you, King Leopold II. Absolute piece of shit. But I mean, all these European countries failed. in colonial, expeditions, going out, trying to invade other people's lands. And it's not to say that nobody is nobody is just like, how should I say, nobody is purely guilty, but it's like more to do with like having people held accountable for their crimes, and people don't want to speak up on it. But the truth of the matter is that all these European armies that you've seen with the French, the British, the Spanish, the Dutch, all these bitch ass, European armies, they haven't really done anything beneficial to the world. The only time where things have gotten better in terms of Western civilization expansion was due to free markets actually saving, post-colonial European nations, which would be like the U.S. or Canada, and yeah, like I'd probably say like the U.S. and Canada. But if it wasn't for any means of free market influence to bring those countries out of poverty, when everything was basically being collectivized at first in colonial nations, that would have caused massive warfare, and a lot of Europeans probably would have ended up getting killed in the process of doing it, and a lot of civil wars would have broken out. And honestly, you probably wouldn't have seen like America to become a successful economy if there wasn't any means of free market expansion. And the reason why is because when you take a look at the how should I say that the level of what they've done, well, I should say taking a look at the overview of colonial societies that were built, free markets have came in and destroyed more government influence to expand economies faster. And when there's less state influence hindering the ability of markets to take over and actually become successful, that's where colonialism dies out, because governments understand their limitations, or people in government understand their limitation of how far that they can go. But they know that when you keep pushing more violence, you end up getting overthrown, and people will start killing you, and then you'll start to become a target of your own political demise. That's why when you've seen, like I'll just say Mexico as a great example. Mexico, they quote unquote got colonized by the Spanish for, a good 400 plus years, in which, that's just on paper of what they say. But oh shit, when you see, um, oh man, I'm so sorry. Like I'm very tired, but when you've seen the evolution of the colonial expansion in, Mexico, what ended up happening is that the Spanish were basically losing their power because they were not holding on. Spain was trying very hard to enforce their their whole cultural mindset onto the people, but the people were slowly but surely not listening to the Spanish, and they were rebelling against them. In Spain alone, they were wasting more resources out of their own economy to support colonial nations that they were trying to make. And what ended up happening was like it was just one big failure. Like for instance, same thing with Florida. I know that Florida, the Spanish have tried to control Florida, but what ended up happening was that there was a lot of slave rebellions, along with American Indian rebellions, and in Florida. And as far as other slave rebellions, like I mean, like the Black African slave rebellions that were being held in Florida, by the Spanish, and I'm pretty sure, other European nations have came in to, create their own mess of destruction. But you see that there was more divide and conquer, and a lot of people were already creating their own factions to battle against colonial establishment. So therefore, it was already failing at the time of, at the time of colonial expansion. Because what ended up happening is that as you keep trying to force people under your will to be enslaved, it creates um, political resistance where people end up becoming more vigilantly savage. So therefore, you have with the revolutions that come out of certain areas such as Mexico or Haiti, and then even Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico, could have easily rebelled, a lot sooner against Spain. But the thing was is that I think what ended up happening was that not a lot of Puerto Ricans were standing up for one another. And obviously, when people try to say the Tainos got extinct, they really didn't. They just basically hid up inside of the mountains, and they figured like, you know what? How about we rebuild our heritage in the mountains, and then what we do after that, we start slowly coming back, and that makes sense because it's like Spain was already losing the battle, but on top of that, it's like push for political rebellion and defeat the colonists and get them out of there. But I mean, furthermore, back to like the Mexico thing. Like, when you take a look at nations that have defeated colonial armies, you do see the economic depravity that those countries had to go through after they defeated the colonists, and therefore people will make this connotation to say, well, you see, colonialism, makes economies stronger, and then if you get rid of the economy that was once there, that means that the people that have revolted for a brand new government will always be, destroying everything that the colonists have built. And it's like, to me, that argument is just as stupid as saying, well, slavery was once good at one point. But you know what? If we just had slavery again and did it, peacefully, and slaves can just peacefully leave their slave master whenever they want to, at least slavery will be better, right? No, that's not true because slavery requires deadly force and violence. You can't just tell a slave to like voluntarily become someone's slave. Like, you actually have to fear someone into submission to keep them as a slave. So the stupidity behind this is literally saying that, well, without colonial invaders, your life wouldn't be good with what you see now, with what markets have done, by the way. And a lot of statists will conflate that to say that, well, without the usage of colonial endangerment, that means that free markets were never successful before government imperialism had ever been expanded. And that's really one of the dumbest arguments that you can hear, because you cannot justify using violence on innocent people and then saying, oh, well, after that, people can just freely trade with one another. No. But here's another good point that I need to bring up. All colonial militaries have always socialized their economies. There's no political example that shows colonial societies that end up becoming a more free market, prosperous, society. Because if you think about it, the colonial military that's invading another country, they're utilizing their own nation's resources to tax their population, and they're using those resources exponentially, well, like, exorbitant. Yeah, they're using those resources a lot to continue invading other parts of the world, and they just end up failing because it's like, you're pissing off your own people within your nation that never consented to support these wars. But on top of that, you're pissing off the people that you're also revolting with. Or you're pissing off the people that you're invading that are going to revolt against you. So it creates a internal conflict of which the colonial, you know, the colonial government's economy is being screwed over, and then the government that is being under attack by the colonial army that's being invaded, usually most of at the time, or it could be like a decentralized anarchy of some sort, which, I don't think that makes any sense because it's like usually most of the time government political invasions are usually applied to other governments in which people have have like established, and therefore that invading government's army would only go after another part of the world because of the tax structure that it has. So furthermore, when it comes down to it, colonial militaries have always done bad, and whenever you've seen the expansion of colonial society getting better, that's only because the free market's doing its job to actually make people more prosperous in a more successful society, and therefore people can actually expand and actually do better things with their life. Now, let me get to the free market thing. Markets alone have done a very, very great job for the world. Just free markets alone is a very, very great tool that mankind has used for hundreds and thousands of years. Maritime trade has always existed. I probably say for well over more than 100,000 plus years. And I know that humans have been trading for a very, very long time. But when you look at the expansion of free market influences and the ethics that people have used to help humanity grow, they've done a very, very good job. And they've done a lot of great influences to help people grow. And therefore, people can say that life was actually better under free market influences in certain societies that were once bad, and that's how societies ended up becoming better. I guess great examples of this that have turned certain nations' economies into free market powerhouses would be you know well, I would say at one point Hong Kong, before Hong Kong got screwed over by China. But yeah, Hong Kong was a very great city state like economy, and they were trading a lot, and they were booming very, 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 very well. I know at one point when Hong Kong's economy had first started, Hong Kong was just a very poor like city, and it didn't have that many resources to grow. But once people have started to marketize the area, and Hong Kong was able to produce a lot more businesses faster and more cost efficiently with little to no government regulation holding things down. Hong Kong started booming, and a lot of people benefited off of the economic expansion, and that's where Hong Kong had I think like one of the best economic growth within a centuries timeline. It it was showing like the index of economic freedom, and I believe at one point Hong Kong was at number one because Hong Kong had such a great deregulated society that was not being held back by the state. And that's really what ends up happening because government authoritarian political ruling classes do not like competition. So therefore, they will always come out of their way, doing heinous, decisions to restrict markets or try to shut them down, because governments do not like the fact that if you're doing better than the political ruling class, and they're making all this money off of trying to tax people and trying to steal other people's wealth however they want to, they'll do anything out of their own power to make sure that they are at the very top. So that's where Hong Kong, had their political invasion with China, and China was trying so hard to take over Hong Kong, in which they now did, and it's very sad because a lot of Hong Kongese people have had a really great rebellious mindset against the Chinese, but I think it was just due to them having, the lack of guns, and I think Hong Kong would have easily beat out China if people actually had the ability to arm themselves, and hopefully Hong Kong can actually become better, because I know Hong Kong will definitely, would like to have their own independence, and I think it makes sense. So, yeah, furthermore, I mean, oh man, I'm so sorry. Yeah. Yeah, so furthermore, I would say when it comes to any means of, of any marketized, expansion on any nation's economy, free market, expansion always benefits humanity in a really good manner, because what ends up happening is that you create a lot of enterprise with a lot of companies that start booming, and therefore everything that a colonial society has thought that they created, which was primarily through the backs of slavery, to create certain government projects that don't really mean anything. Markets come in and they do much better things to give people the opportunity to do what they need to do, and then that's where you see economies boom when you have little to no government oversight, that's destroying that's not destroying people's ability to create marketized entities to help people that are in need to grow and expand. So I would say, to finalize, in conclusion, colonialism has shown its failures all over the world. You can see that in multiple nations such as Mexico, a lot of nations in Africa, um, a lot of Asian countries, a lot of Arabic countries, definitely, plenty of them. With the Soviet Union invading, a crap ton of nations, and they started creating all these messed up societies, and all these nations were just basically like, USSR failures. But I mean, I think most people would get the picture of like what I'm trying to explain. The more colonial societies that have been built, the less economically free societies that people have actually dealt with, and therefore it has created such a massive destruction of many different cultures to start creating a lot of rebellions and a lot of violent civil war, revolutions. And that's where you've seen people to just not be successful at all, because there's no drive. There's no reason for an economy to get better, because people have been damaged from the colonial invaders. And I mean, if anybody's gonna just try to, comment down below and say that I'm being biased, here's one thing. I can't be biased if I'm actually pointing out the facts that colonial society is not a peaceful society. And the countries that are doing bad now in the world, they've been attacked by colonial invaders. And then even before colonial invasion had occurred, they were still doing bad, but they weren't doing as bad compared to what colonial society has brought to the world. So when you think about it, it's like, why screw over other nations that are trying to rebuild themselves, trying to get people together to be more politically resistant to the state, and then you create more statism by going after other countries where their governments are not doing good at all, but still you still want to create more political, infringement to destroy their economy, and then force them to give you resources by way of forced mercantilism. That's really what it is. I forgot to point that out too. Um, I mean, if you guys want to know anything about mercantilism under colonial rule, I would definitely take a look at the British Empire controlling the East India. Uh, you know, well, how should I say, like, take a look at Britain invading India, and it will show you everything of what the British have done and how much that they have failed by creating a massive revolt against them. And then that's how India created its own problems with its own people, that led into the split of India and Pakistan, and then all the other countries that were next to it. So I mean, that's a really good economic read that you could take a look at, but I would probably look that up through the Mises Institute or probably even David Friedman. David Friedman probably has like a lot of good books on that, or even Thomas Sowell. I think Thomas Sowell can easily break that down very well. But I guess to conclude, like people like certain statists will say colonialism is a good thing because when you take a look at certain societies, they will always turn to societies like like the Scotland compared to the UK, in which for those of you that don't know, at one point the UK was invaded by the Roman Empire. This is like thousands of years ago, and the Roman Empire had controlled the UK for a good amount of time before the UK, had revolted and they had their own country for thousands of years ago. But what ended up happening is that their neighboring country, which is Scotland, at this point in time during, I would probably say before the medieval era had even started, this is probably heading into like the very end of like the Stone Age or Bronze Age. But basically, the Roman Empire controlled Britain. They brought their ideas to them. They were forcing them into slavery and all that crap. But there was a comparison that was shown that the colonization with the UK compared to Scotland, people in the UK were doing better under Roman rule. But the difference was is that the British were not benefiting off of what the Romans destroying everything that they had. And when the Romans were trying so hard to hold the British down, they were just basically stupid enough to destroy more infrastructure and force them, to go to war and do all this, messed up crap. And then that's how Britain ended up, revolting. And then obviously Britain, they took over Scotland, and then, Scotland's wanted to do the same thing to secede from Britain because Scottish people do not look at them to be the same with British people because British people basically took the same idea of like what the Romans have taught them to invade other countries in the world, and therefore that's where you've seen Britain to become a very like a very destructive political power. But Britain's not really doing that no more. They're not controlling the waves, and they were already getting beat up too much in the past, so they were just like, what, like it's just time to just keep ourselves isolationists and try to work with what we got. But I mean, I'm not gonna be talking about that. I don't really be respecting no political authoritarian psycho nut jobs. But no disrespect to the British people that I actually have good relationships with. Um, but yeah, the whole thing is that when we look at colonial societies that were forced onto people to live under, they have never brought a good benefit to the world. Therefore, what you see now is what you expect out of these societies, and um, the more subservience that you try to force through propaganda on a society to be obedient, the more likely that this society that you're trying to create will just end up rebelling against you because not everybody's going to listen to you, and people are going to vigilantly attack you in certain points of history, in which like it just turns up to become a mental spiral of failure because all you're doing is just creating a lot of bloody conflict and nothing gets like achieved. And I mean, I don't need to break down every single colonial society that has been forced onto people, but the economics will show that markets have saved colonial societies from failing because colonialism is just pure socialism. It's just socialism that's being forced onto people to live under a really messed up corrupt system, and until people start revolting and reclaiming their independence as a nation, it's like you've already failed as a colonial power because you're not doing anything beneficial. All you're doing is just invading other people, and you're just pointing guns at people or pointing weapons at innocent people to basically submerge them into your way of life. But It's all stupid. F colonialism. Colonialism is it's a bitch made philosophy. And that's really what it is. Political leaders are just absolute morons. And it's just been shown countless times in the world that you don't get peace in the world by inflicting violence on the world. So, that's pretty much my whole take. Free markets have done its job very well, and I think the world will definitely see the power of markets coming a lot stronger when market anarchy takes over. And at least for my libertarian, you know, overview of it, I think markets are doing a great job now, and I think the future will be very, very great as technology grows. But yeah, that's pretty much what I have to say. Um, I don't really need to explain much of myself more. But to hell with you, colonial status. I know that you guys will die really soon. So, to hell with you. I'll see you guys later. Peace out. Peace, love, liberty, happiness. Alright, goodbye.